Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own life? I don't mean a spooky, rattling chains kind of ghost. I mean a quiet one. The kind that moves through rooms unnoticed. A whisper of displaced air. The kind that sits at the family dinner table, while conversations flow around and through you, as if you are a pane of clean glass. The kind whose presence is an assumption, a piece of furniture in the background of a photograph, not a fact to be acknowledged. For most of my 24 years, that was my designated role in the family. I was Amanda, the quiet one, the self-sufficient one, the low-maintenance one. I was the background character in the loud, vibrant, perpetually celebrated movie starring my younger brother, Tyler. Our family had its own solar system, a flawed cosmology of its own making. My parents, Mark and Karen, were the sun, a binary star of anxious, doting energy. Their light, their warmth, their entire focus was directed at a single celestial body, Tyler. He was the golden planet they orbited, his every achievement a supernova. His every minor need a gravitational pull that warped the rest of us into strange, elliptical paths. And me, I was a distant moon, cold and quiet, dutifully reflecting a little of their light but generating none of my own. My existence was noted, but rarely celebrated. I learned early on not to expect a parade. A quiet nod of acknowledgement was a victory. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was the foundational architecture of our family, the load-bearing walls upon which everything else was built. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a lifetime of small dismissals that, when added together, amounted to a profound and gaping wound. The most glaring example, the one that serves as the perfect thesis statement for my childhood, was my undergraduate graduation after 4 years of grueling work, of late nights spent in the library fueled by lukewarm coffee, of intense focus. In a demanding computer science program, I graduated with honors. The acknowledgement from my parents was a flimsy Hallmark card, the kind you buy at a gas station, with a crisp $20 bill tucked inside. "That's nice, dear," my mother had said over the phone, her voice distracted. "We're so proud of you, but we're just so busy with Tyler right now. You understand." What they were so busy with was celebrating the fact that Tyler, who was only a sophomore in college at the time, had just landed a paid summer internship at a mid-level marketing firm. An internship, not a degree, not 4 years of dedication, culminating in a diploma. A 10-week gig that involved mostly making coffee and running spreadsheets. Yet, for this, there was a catered dinner party at a fancy steakhouse. There were toasts from my father, his voice booming with a pride I had never heard directed at me. He stood before all our assembled relatives, a glass of expensive wine in his hand, and declared, "This kid's going places. He's got the drive, the ambition, a real go-getter." I sat at that dinner, my own diploma tucked away in a cardboard tube in my childhood bedroom, and I felt that familiar, chilling sense of invisibility descend like a shroud. It wasn't malicious, not in a way you could point to and call evil. That would have been easier, in a way. This was a more insidious, more heartbreaking kind of neglect. It was a deep, fundamental, unspoken belief that my accomplishments were secondary. My milestones were placeholders. My life was the quiet, ambient music playing in the background of his much more important story. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself their approval was irrelevant, that my own sense of accomplishment was enough. 4 years, I almost believed it. The final straw, the one that broke a lifetime of quiet, stoic acceptance, came 2 years later. I was in the final, grueling stretch of my master's degree, a specialized and incredibly demanding program in data science at a top university. Tyler was, at long last, graduating with his own bachelor's degree in communications. I was genuinely happy for him. His path had been meandering, his focus scattered, and I was proud he'd finally crossed the finish line. I was looking forward to celebrating with the family, to finally being part of a shared, happy milestone. The phone call that shattered that illusion came from my Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, and the family's inadvertent conscience. She was a kind woman who often seemed baffled by my parents' behavior. "Amanda, honey," she said, her voice laced with an awkward hesitation that immediately put me on high alert. "I was just on the phone with your mother, confirming the details for Tyler's graduation dinner at the Capitol Grill next Saturday. It sounds very fancy. I asked her what time I should swing by to pick you up. And, well," there was a very long pause. My stomach went cold. I knew what was coming. "What did she say?" "Aunt Linda," she said. "She said you weren't on the list. That it was just for immediate family and Tyler's close friends. She said she assumed you'd be too busy with your school thing." Linda's voice was full of a pity that was almost as painful as the news itself. "Amanda, I'm so sorry. I really thought you knew." "I didn't know." I hung up the phone, a strange, buzzing numbness spreading from my chest out to my fingertips. I wasn't just overlooked. I was actively, deliberately excluded. This wasn't a sin of omission, it was a sin of commission. I dialed my father's number, my hand surprisingly steady, my heart a block of ice. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and oblivious. "Hey, Mandy. What's up? Everything okay?" "Dad," I said, my voice flat, a carefully controlled monotone. "Aunt Linda just called me. She told me about Tyler's graduation dinner. She said I wasn't invited." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line, the weary, put-upon sound of a man who couldn't be bothered with my trivial, inconvenient feelings. "Oh, for God's sake, Amanda, your Aunt Linda needs to learn to keep her mouth shut. It's not a big deal. It's a small party, and you know how expensive that place is. We had to keep the numbers down. You didn't have room for your own daughter?" The question came out as a whisper. And then came the words. The words that were a point of no return. The words that would change everything. That would finally, after 24 years, sever the cord of hope I didn't even know I was still desperately clinging to. "Frankly, Amanda," he said, his voice laced with a cold, dismissive, almost contemptuous cruelty, "you didn't really deserve to be there. Tyler worked his butt off. He's starting a real career, with a real company. You barely finished school yourself the first time, and now you're just hiding out in academia, getting another useless piece of paper. It's not the same thing. We're celebrating real achievement." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The part of me that could be hurt by him, the part that craved his approval, had finally withered from malnourishment and died. In its place was a profound, chilling clarity. It was like a switch had been flipped in a dark, dusty room, and I could suddenly see the shape of everything for what it was. The neglect wasn't accidental. It was a philosophy. My achievements weren't real. My life wasn't a priority. In the grand ledger of my family, I was a rounding error. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It was forged till I hung up the phone. I didn't throw it across the room. I didn't slam it down. I placed it gently back on its charger, my movements slow and deliberate. The hot, Messy emotions of hurt and anger were gone, replaced by a quiet, determined calm that felt more powerful than any rage I had ever experienced. I was done. Not done with my family in a dramatic, door-slamming, you'll be sorry when I'm gone kind of way. I was done with the project, the lifelong, soul-crushing project of trying to earn their recognition. I was done trying to be seen by people who had made a conscious decision to keep their eyes closed. The futile, exhausting, decades-long effort was officially, finally, over. My own graduation, for my master's degree, was 6 weeks away. I had been planning to just have the diploma mailed to me. I was going to skip the ceremony entirely, assuming, correctly, that no one from my family would care to attend anyway. But my father's words, intended to diminish me, had given me a strange, unexpected gift, the gift of purpose. I realized I didn't need them to celebrate me. I could celebrate myself. My plan began to take shape in my mind, not as an act of revenge, but as an act of profound and necessary self-validation. It wasn't about hurting them. It was about seeing myself. It was about clarity. It was about visibility. It was about creating a moment so real, so tangible, so undeniably public, that their distorted version of reality could no longer exist. I wasn't going to fight their narrative. That would be like wrestling with smoke. I was going to render it obsolete. I was going to make myself visible, not to them, but to myself. And if they happened to be caught in the glare, well, perhaps they should have been wearing sunglasses. A few days later, the university sent out a mass email. The subject line read, RSVP for graduate commencement. The email contained a link to a form where we could confirm our attendance and request our allotted guest tickets. For tickets per graduate, the number felt both generous and stingy. I clicked the link. The form loaded, and there were 4 blank spaces for the names of my guests. For a long, lingering moment, I pictured writing my parents' names, my brother's name. The old habit, the ingrained, vestigial hope, died a final, quiet death on my laptop screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then, with a deep, cleansing breath, I deleted the phantom letters of their names from my mind. And then, I started to type. The first name was Katie, my best friend since kindergarten, the keeper of my secrets, the witness to my life, the one who had listened to every story of neglect, who had celebrated every small, overlooked victory with a fierce, protective ferocity my own family could never muster. She was my constant, my North Star. The second name was Professor Eleanor Rodriguez, my thesis advisor, a brilliant, tough, but incredibly supportive woman who had seen my potential from the very first day of class. She had pushed me, challenged my assumptions, and ultimately written a glowing, heartfelt recommendation that had been instrumental in getting me into this program. She was the academic validation I had always craved and never received at home. The third name was Brooklyn, my roommate for the past 2 years, a chaotic, hilarious, fiercely loyal art student who wore her heart on her paint-splattered sleeve. She had seen me at my most stressed out and sleep-deprived, and had always been there with a cup of tea, a terrible reality TV show, and a profoundly stupid joke when I needed it most. She was the family I came home to every night, the one who asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. The fourth name was a surprise, even to me. Mr. Williams, my elderly, widowed neighbor from down the hall, a retired history teacher with kind, crinkly eyes and an endless supply of stories about the civil rights movement in Detroit. He would always ask how my studies were going, Whenever we met at the mailboxes, his questions thoughtful and his interest genuine. When I'd finished my thesis, on a whim, I'd given him a printed copy. A week later, he slipped a 3-page, handwritten note under my door, filled with his thoughts on my methodology and conclusions. He saw me, just a neighbor, a near stranger, saw my mind and my work more clearly than my own blood. Katie, Professor Rodriguez, Brooklyn, Mr. Williams. That was my guest list. That was my family. I reread the names. A small, genuine smile spreading across my face. I clicked submit, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly, completely, unapologetically happy. Graduation day arrived, a perfect, sun-drenched Saturday in May. The kind of day that feels full of promise. The campus was alive with a buzzing, joyous energy, a sea of black robes and beaming, proud families. I found my chosen family waiting for me near the entrance to the stadium, a small island of calm in the chaotic sea. Katie, already emotional, tackled me in a hug that nearly knocked me over. Professor Rodriguez, looking out of place without her usual stack of papers, shook my hand firmly, her eyes shining with a pride that felt more authentic than any my parents had ever shown. Brooklyn handed me a silver flask disguised as a tube of sunscreen for emergencies, she whispered with a wink. And Mr. Williams, dressed in a sharp, distinguished tweed suit, presented me with a single, perfect red rose. For a brilliant young woman on her day of triumph, he said, his voice thick with a grandfatherly emotion. I sat through the long, formal speeches, a goofy, genuine, unforced smile plastered on my face. When they finally got to my department, and the dean called my name, Amanda Sellers, Master of Science in Data Analytics, summa cum laude, a huge, raucous cheer erupted from a small section in the stands. It was them, my four people, making more noise than a family of 20. They were my cheering section. They were my people. Walking across that stage was not an ending. It was a beginning. The physical weight of the diploma in my hand, the crisp leather of its cover, felt like a deed. A title, not to a property, but to my own life. I had done it. I had built this. Not for their approval, not for a pat on the back, but for me. And as I looked out at the cheering crowd, at the thousands of strangers and the four people who truly mattered, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I didn't need anyone else's validation ever again. I had finally learned how to generate my own. After the ceremony, as we were leaving the stadium, caught in the slow-moving river of graduates and their families, I saw it, and I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. The university, as part of a new, high-profile marketing campaign to highlight its graduate programs and attract new talent, had erected a series of massive, building-sized banners along the main concourse. Each banner featured a larger-than-life photograph of a distinguished student from one of the programs, a student chosen by the faculty for their outstanding academic performance and research. And there, on a banner that must have been 20 feet tall, fluttering gently in the May breeze, was my face. It was a professional headshot I'd had taken for my professional networking profile a few months prior, an image I thought would only ever be seen as a tiny thumbnail. But here it was, magnified 1,000 times, my expression calm and confident. Underneath the photograph, in huge, bold, sans-serif letters, it read, Amanda Sellers, MS in Data Analytics, summa cum laude, pioneering the future of machine learning. I just stared at it, Me. My name. My achievement. My face. Not just acknowledged, but celebrated. Publicly. Indisputably. Visibly. It was the most surreal, disorienting, and profoundly validating moment of my entire life. "Oh my God, Amanda," Katie shrieked, her voice cutting through my days. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking with excitement. "This is incredible. This is insane. We have to get a picture." She pulled me in front of the banner, a tiny human figure standing beneath a monument to her own existence. We took a grinning, joyous selfie, my diploma clutched in one hand, Mr. Williams's perfect red rose in the other. It was a picture of pure, unadulterated happiness. Katie posted it to all her social media channels before we'd even left the concourse. Her caption was simple and full of love. "So unbelievably proud of my best friend, the smartest person I know. Officially a master. Look out, world." She tagged me in the post. She tagged the university. And with that one simple, happy click, that small act of celebration, she lit the fuse. The fallout was about to begin. I spent the rest of the evening in a blissful, celebratory bubble. We went out for a nice dinner at a quiet restaurant, where Mr. Williams told stories about his time in the army, and Professor Rodriguez gave me invaluable career advice. We toasted with champagne. We laughed until our sides hurt. I didn't look at my phone once. I was completely present, completely happy, surrounded by the warmth of a family I had chosen for myself. It wasn't until I got home, close to midnight, my cheeks sore from smiling, that I saw the aftermath of Katie's innocent post. My phone, which had been on silent in my purse, was a digital wasteland of missed notifications. 12 missed calls from my mother, 8 from my father, 5 from Tyler, and a flood of text messages, each one more frantic, more bewildered, more guilt-ridden than the last. "Mom. Amanda, call me the second you get this." "What is this picture?" Katie posted. "Dad, we're seeing pictures of you in a cap and gown. Why didn't you tell us you were graduating today?" "Tyler. Mom is a mess. She's crying. What the hell is going on? Did you get another degree?" "Mom. That banner. Is that real? We had no idea you were doing so well. We had no idea." They weren't angry. Not yet. They were shocked. They were confused. They were guilty. But not guilty for a lifetime of neglect. They were guilty for being caught, for having their willful ignorance exposed in such a public and undeniable way. The banner, the summa cum laude distinction, the joyous photo, the flood of congratulatory comments from my friends and colleagues. It was all irrefutable proof of a life they had chosen not to see. And now that it was public, they could no longer maintain their comfortable, convenient narrative of me as the quiet, unremarkable, perpetually struggling daughter. Their collective delusion had been shattered, and they were panicking. I let them sweat it out overnight. I slept a deep, dreamless, and profoundly peaceful sleep. The next morning, over a cup of coffee, I decided to call my mother. Her voice, when she answered, was a raw, ragged mixture of tears and disbelief. "Amanda," she sobbed into the phone. "Why? Why didn't you tell us? We would have been there. We would have bought you a beautiful gift. We had no idea you were even in a master's program." And there it was, the core of their blindness, stated so plainly. They had no idea, because they had never asked. They had never shown enough interest to retain the information I had freely given them. I took a deep breath, my voice calm and steady, stripped of the pleading. Her tone it had always carried when I spoke to them. I was no longer the hurt child begging for a scrap of attention. I was an adult, a peer, stating facts. Mom, I've been in this program for 2 years. I told you about it when I was accepted. You said, "That's nice, dear," and then immediately changed the subject to ask me if I'd heard about Tyler's new summer job. I don't remember that, she said weakly, the classic defense of the willfully ignorant. I know you don't, I said, and there was no malice in my voice, only a sad, resigned truth. Just like you don't remember that when I graduated, with my bachelor's degree, you threw a party for Tyler's internship instead. I remember calling Dad about Tyler's graduation dinner and being told, in no uncertain terms, that I didn't deserve to be there because my achievements weren't real. He didn't mean it like that. She started, her voice trailing off. Yes, he did, I said, my voice still calm, still measured. And it's okay, because it made me realize something. I have spent my entire life auditioning for a role in this family, a role I was never going to get. I have been your second place child, the runner-up in a race I never even knew I was running. And I'm done. I am done competing. I didn't have my graduation for you. I had it for me, and for the people who have actually been a part of my life, who have shown up for me. I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just done trying. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. She couldn't comprehend it. A world where I wasn't desperately, pathetically vying for her approval was a world she didn't understand. I had changed the fundamental rules of the game, and she didn't know how to play anymore. I had taken away her power, the power of her approval, and she was lost in the weeks that followed. My professional life began to accelerate at a dizzying, almost unbelievable pace. The university's communications department did a full-length feature story on me, and my thesis research, which was then picked up by a couple of influential tech blogs. The story went viral in the niche but powerful world of data science. My LinkedIn profile exploded. Recruiters started calling, their voices smooth and promising. I had interviews with some of the top tech firms in the country, companies whose names were synonymous with innovation. My visibility was no longer confined to a banner on a college campus. It was becoming a professional, verifiable reality. My family was silent. I think they were in a state of profound shock, unable to reconcile the quiet, invisible daughter they had created in their minds with the successful, sought-after woman they were now reading about online. I assumed they had retreated, that a new, distant, but peaceful status quo would emerge. I was wrong. The neglect I was about to discover had a much deeper and more malicious root. It wasn't just about favoritism. It was about control. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was from my Aunt Patricia, my father's estranged older sister. We weren't close, but she was a pragmatic woman with a strong, unshakable sense of justice. Amanda, she said, her voice low and serious, no time for pleasantries. We need to talk. I was at your parents' house last night for your grandmother's birthday. They think I'm on their side in all of this, that I think you've been disrespectful, so they speak very freely around me. And I heard something that made my blood run cold. Something you need to know. I braced myself, a sense of dread coiling in my stomach. Your father's parents, she said, her voice dropping even lower. Your grandparents left a significant amount of money in a family trust. It's meant to be divided equally among the grandchildren, you and Tyler, when you each turn 30. But your parents are the trustees, and they were on the phone with their estate lawyer. They are actively trying to amend the trust. They want to give Tyler full power of attorney over the entire fund as soon as he turns 25 next year. They were talking about his good business sense and your emotional instability and lack of real-world trust. Phone felt heavy and cold in my hand. This wasn't neglect anymore. This wasn't thoughtlessness or casual favoritism. This was a conscious, calculated, premeditated act of financial sabotage. This was a punishment for my independence, for my success, for my refusal to stay in the neat, quiet, invisible little box they had built for me. And it was the final piece of evidence I needed. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. The old Amanda would have been devastated, crushed under the weight of such a profound betrayal. The new Amanda, the one forged in the fire of their dismissal, was energized. They had made a critical error. They had escalated the conflict from the fuzzy, emotional realm of feelings and perceptions to the cold, hard, black and white world of the law. And that was a battlefield where I had the advantage. My father's sneering dismissal of my career, of my life spent in academia, was about to become his biggest regret, because my life in academia had taught me one thing above all else: how to research, how to gather evidence, how to build an airtight, data-driven case. I didn't call them. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't confront them. I made an appointment with a highly recommended, notoriously aggressive trust and estate lawyer. I walked into her sleek, downtown office with a thick manila folder. Inside was a printed copy of my master's thesis, the feature articles from the tech blogs, a copy of my lucrative job offer from a top-tier firm in Silicon Valley, and a detailed, written account of my conversation with Aunt Patricia, complete with dates and times. I was armed with data. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Ms. Chen, reviewed everything with a clinical, predatory focus. Their stated argument for your instability and lack of prospects is demonstrably, and I would even say, laughably false, she said, a grim, satisfied smile on her face. Your documented success completely and utterly undermines any rational basis for giving your brother sole power. Their actions demonstrate clear and biased intent to defraud you of your inheritance. We can fight this, and we will win. And so we did. Ms. Chen, on my behalf, filed a formal legal petition. We didn't just ask for the proposed amendment to be blocked. That would have been purely defensive. We went on the offensive. We filed for full, immediate access to all past and present trust records, account statements, and correspondence. We demanded a complete, independent, court-ordered audit of the trust's finances from its inception. We were forcing a legal confrontation, dragging their secret, whispered plans into the harsh, unforgiving light of a deposition room. There would be no more hiding in the shadows of their own narrative. The effect of our legal filing was instantaneous and absolute. Faced with the threat of a full legal audit, the potential for being found in breach of their fiduciary duty, and the undeniable, publicly verifiable evidence of my success, my parents and their lawyer knew they had no case. They crumbled. There were no emotional, tearful phone calls this time. No desperate pleas. Just a sterile, formal letter from their attorney to Ms. Chen, agreeing to all of our terms. The trust was to be amended, but not in the way they had planned. At Ms. Chen's insistence, it was amended to create two separate, distinct, and legally firewalled trusts, one for me and one for Tyler, with a neutral third-party corporate bank appointed as trustee for both. My parents had been stripped of all control. My financial future was secure, protected from their bias, their favoritism, and their schemes forever. I had one, and I had done it without ever raising my voice. I had one with facts, with data, with evidence, with the undeniable proof of my own competence. I had used the very tools of my useless academic career to secure my victory. The story ends not with a bang, not with a dramatic courtroom showdown, but with the quiet, satisfying hum of a life moving forward. I took the job in California. I packed my life into boxes and I moved 3,000 miles away, not to run from my family, but to run toward my own future. A future I had built and secured for myself. The physical distance is a healthy, peaceful buffer. We exchange polite, infrequent text messages on holidays and birthdays. The old, toxic dynamic is gone, replaced by a vast, quiet, neutral space. It's not forgiveness. Forgiveness would require an apology, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing that I know will never come. This is something far more peaceful. It's irrelevance. I have stopped fighting for their approval. I have stopped trying to make them see me. Instead, I have built a life, a career, and a reputation so successful, so visible, so fundamentally real, that they can no longer pretend I don't exist. They see the articles about my work that my aunts post on Facebook. They hear about my promotions from other relatives. They see my life, not because I make any effort to show it to them, but because it's simply too bright for them to ignore any longer. My existence is no longer an assumption. It is a fact. The quiet ghost who haunted the hallways of her own home has learned how to build her own house, how to turn on all the lights, how to be so solid and so present that she casts her own long shadow. I am, finally, and forever, undeniable.